Hi guys, Stu here with a new video, and this video is the long-awaited tier list prediction video for PvP in 10.1.5. I've tested multiple classes and specs, actually all the classes and specs that had changes towards the PTR and the patch note, and I have a pretty good grasp on what I can expect coming Wednesday in EU, Tuesday for NA, and I feel like the meta will change, but not too much. I feel like a lot of people are actually too excited for specific specs, and I am actually like going to discuss it extensively. Now, a bit of a spoiler alert. I think everyone knows that Augmentation Evoker is going to be pretty busted. And my prediction for multiple, I would say, brackets, but also just like PvP in general, I think Augmentation Evoker is S+. It does too much. It is overloaded. The kit is really overloaded in PvP, and they will need some hefty PvP balancing. And I'm not saying that they have to cut their damage in two, or their healing in two, or their kit in two, but something has to shift into more damage, I would say, and less about the whole I buff other DPSs and healers in general. I think it's too much for the PvP. In this current day and age, where you only have one real support to DPS, which is, I would say, Augmentation Evoker, but you could also say SP, for example. Shadow Priest is also a pretty good support, like, caster. At least it was that in the past. Now it can really fully fledged kill someone from 100 to 0. Augmentation Evoker is going to be a menace. The biggest loser, I would say, from that patch is pretty much Devastation Evoker. I feel like they got, like, Augmentation Evoker got everything that Devastation Evoker actually wanted, and that's a bit sad, but I guess you have no other way. What I would have done, instead of making like a third spec, is probably like split that spec in two, Augmentation Evoker, and give those tools to Preservation and Devastation. That's what I would have done. But anyways, I'm not really in place to actually do anything for that. So it's going to be a C tier spec. It's going to be the same, basically. You're very niche, you're still going to one-shot people, but you're not going to exist outside of those one-shots. And that is just very sad for a Devastation Evoker, but it is what it is. Preservation Evoker is going to be still very strong. I don't know if I'm rating it A tier or S tier. I don't think S+, like, it's reserved to the best of the best, which will eventually get nerfed, especially in PvP. But I think Preservation Evoker is going to be A tier. It's too strong in specific comps. It is still probably the best RBG healer out there. You want basically two Preservation Evokers if you can choose. One is also like very mandatory, I think. And I think in PvP, in 3s, you're going to be still very good. In 2s, you're a bit sad because it's very limited, and your power is actually to AoE heal and to deal with a lot of threats because of the AoE heals you have. And in 2s, you have one less to heal, so it means that your AoE heal is going to suffer 30% more, basically. So for me, A tier, it's going to be still strong in 3s. Social fall, it's going to be somewhat problematic sometimes whenever you don't have CDs, but you're still going to be good. RBG is pretty mandatory, so I think overall A tier. Now, let's talk about a DPS spec. Let's talk about Warlocks. And I think Affliction Warlock, I've tested multiple things, and I think they could surprise a lot of people coming Wednesday, Tuesday, depending on your region. But it is not the build that you would expect. I have found, not really found, but I'm actually dabbling into the single target Warlock spec, like Affliction Warlock spec, where you only have one unstable affliction that you can put on anyone, but that unstable affliction is going to do 25% more damage because of the buff you got, and you do not get the debuff from the triple unstable affliction PvP talent, which is also minus 25%. So it's going to be quite nice. Now, in RBGs, you're never going to play that. In 3s, you depends on with whom you're going to play, you kind of want unstable affliction on every single like guy in front of you. But if you can have like only one target and you know you're going to go for one target only, there is a way where you can play like that one big unstable affliction dot with of course also the new PvP talent where you are going to siphon the life of someone in 3 seconds time. It is a channel again, so Affliction Warlock is going to be the channel based spec. I'm going to rate it B tier. B tier is pretty much good for me. It's like middle of the road, and I think all specs should hover into A B tier if you want to actually have a competitive bot balance meta, but that's never going to happen. But I think Affliction Warlock is going to be quite nice if the meta slows down just a tad bit, but if it can play around the strength of a Affliction Warlock, it might be still a great class to play. Now, Destruction Warlock, they are pretty much unchanged. They got a talent revamp, like just a talent point revamp, but it's 10% more damage on Chaos Bolt. You are not going to opt into that if you are going to PvP. You have too many points to spend, and that single talent is not going to do anything. It's better for PvE though. 50% more damage on Chaos Bolt is quite nasty, but it's only 10% damage increase for PvP, so I would not opt into that. I feel like they're very squishy since the healing nerfs that they got because of Demonology Warlock. So we are like the collateral damage. I think A tier is a fair assessment for Destruction Warlock because of the few buffs you will see later down the line on the tier list. I think in general you still have to cast a lot. Yes, interrupting is a lot more punishing these days, but Destruction Warlock is one of those universal classes where you know what you have to kick, and it's pretty much Chaos Bolt. And if you cannot kick Chaos Bolt, what you want to do is do micro CCs. And yes, he can kill you with Incinerates, he can kill you with Shadow Burns, with Conflags, but they're very much killable. And I don't think from all the casters that you have to face, Destruction Warlock is actually not the worst caster to face. I think Demonology Warlock is probably still the worst, although their design is pretty bad. I made a video about that. And 10.1.5 will not change. It will actually frustrate a lot of people if they're still going to be meta, but we will see if they're going to change that. Demonology Warlock, all the buffs, all the changes kind of are not really meant to be for PvP. They will not really affect PvP too much. You will rely a lot more on the Felguard as well, and the Tyrant as well. The bugs are still there. I feel like currently, if you play Demonology Warlock, it's for the damage, which sometimes is nasty, and also unavoidable for a lot of people. But also for the CC and the amount of utility you have as a Demonology Warlock and the tankiness. I'm going to rate S tier Demonology Warlock, but trust me, for me, it's going to feel that it's going to get like into A tier pretty soon. I'm going to put it in S tier, but I might change at the end of the tier list. And again, I think in general, if you want to have a more concise opinion about me for Demonology Warlock, I made a video about that. I think the design is really bad. I think the changes that they made is going into the worst direction we could go. I think Shadowlands was the more fun iteration for Demonology Warlock, although very cheesy, I may add. Let's talk about rogues. I want to talk about rogues really quickly before, because I think a lot of people are like actually thinking about Assassination Rogue and maybe playing it. They had no changes, and they are going to rework rogues in 10.1.5 or 10.1.7 or even in 10.2, because Ian has said that in an interview. It's pretty bad. Still, you only have one comp where you can make it work. I'm going to put it in C tier because I'm going to be harsh. I'm going to put it in C tier because there are too many things that can actually like ruin your day in PvP. In RBGs, you can still make it work as an Assassination Rogue. In 2s, you can still make it work as an Assassination Rogue, but if you're facing a Survival Hunter, you're dead, pretty much. You can make it work in 3s because you can like choose your teammates, and in social for it's going to be feel miserable because again your dots and can just fall off. Like again, you can put like a death mark and then someone actually decides to sap the target or remove all the bleeds and poisons because of a CC like a polymorph. That can ruin your day. So for me, Assassination Rogue is pretty much C tier. Outlaw Rogue, I want to talk about Outlaw Rogue first. They got like a pretty substantial aura buff. Now, is it enough? I don't think so, but I do feel like Outlaw Rogue is in a better place than Assassination Rogue, although they're also quite bad because of their like damage. Again, I tested it a bit on the PTR, but it's very hard to judge the damage from Outlaw Rogues because the build-up is very slow. They're not going to 100-0 someone from stealth, so that's not going to happen. And it's more something you can judge whenever you're actually doing like a lot of arenas, a lot of solo shuffles, a lot of RBGs or PGs or whatever activity you want to do in PvP. But I'm going to judge it B tier because the aura buff is quite consistent. They are looking into it, and I think the meta kinda goes into the place where Outlaw Rogue could make themselves pretty known for. But the big problem about Outlaw Rogue is that they are overshadowed by a Subtlety Rogue, which got a 4% buff, by the way, and no real other changes. For me, Subtlety Rogue is still S tier. Anyone can say whatever they want. In 2s, it is king. In 3s, it is king. In solo shuffle, it can really feel good, as it can feel very bad. Again, you are pretty much dependent on your teammates to not use their stun on the kill target that you want to go for. But that's just Subtlety Rogues in general. You're going to have a problem with that. But I think overall, in every single category for PvP, even in RBGs, it's still going to be quite nice. And for me, S tier, it is like, again, unmatched. I think they will need a rework. They are going to have a rework probably from what they are actually announcing. Now, let's hope they're not going to destroy and butcher rogue specs. I hope they are going to make it more fair in PvP and PvE, but they can still like shine through skills and make it their spec work in like all content on World of Warcraft. Now let's talk about DKs. I want to talk about DKs because a lot of people are like saying that they see the light for Unholy DK, and I tested it, and people are like kind of blind about the buffs that they do get from the patch notes on 10.1.5. They get a lot of consistent damage buffs, but you should remind yourself that unfortunately, Unholy DK and Frost DK, they work very, very hard about CDs. And the problem with Unholy DK, they lose Raise A-Bomb, they lose 50% damage on A-Bomb Limb, they lose 10% haste, I think, on Unholy Assault, which now you're probably not going to take anymore. You even lose half of the haste from the Empowered Runic Weapons. So you are actually like invited to go and look for another talent on the class tree, which is pretty insane. So you had a lot of like CD nerfs, which is very concerning, and the consistent damage is still good. It still can make it work, but we will have to see what's going to happen with Unholy DK. For me, Unholy DK is nowhere near S tier. They're still very squishy. I think people are still sleeping on that you're still going to be the targets in arenas. Yes, you can make it work with a specific comp and such, but are we rating about the classes and specs, or are we rating purely about the comps? Because then a Caustic Leaf, like Destruction Warlock, is pretty strong with Elemental Shaman. They could be S+. But if I'm thinking about Destruction Warlock, I'm thinking about the squishiness of a Destruction Warlock. I'm thinking about multiple aspects in PvP. I think Unholy DK, they really are going to sit in B tier for me. They're not good. They are just like there. I think people are like going to be very disappointed. I'm going to play DK, by the way. I'm going to play DK in 10.1.5 because I do like the consistent damage buffs, and I do feel that they're going to get more buffs going into the patch. So in 1 week or 2 weeks, you will see a buff for Unholy DK, and then they're going to be busted. But right now they're very average. I think good. They might be A tier maybe. I'm going to put maybe A tier. They are not strong, man. They lose a lot of CDs, and you do test it on the PTR, and you do feel it, and you do see it also. If you do the same rotation on your 10.1 character and then the same rotation on 10.1.5 character, you do see that you're losing Raise A-Bomb, which is a big CD for like Unholy DKs. You're losing 50% damage on A-Bomb Limp, which is doing quite some damage if you're actually going for mastery. You're losing a lot of haste, so it makes the class even less smooth, and it actually kind of forces you outside of mastery, and they kind of force you to go haste. They nerfed the zombie that explodes and does damage. That's even more nerfed, so it's maybe sometimes not even worth to go for that. So I think people are like really on the copium side whenever they are talking about Unholy DK. I think A tier is really the max I see, and I do see it B tier more, but I'm going to put it in A tier for now so I can see which specs I'm going to be putting on B tier and then compare them if they are strong or not. For example, Frost DK is still C tier, man. I'm sorry. I think Frost DK, they got a few like great changes, I would say. The direction is very good, but again, they nerfed the CDs, so it means Bill of Frost does not do, like, it does still do something, but you do feel like you're going to be nerfed 20% on your like obliterates. It does feel like I lose pretty much 20k on my biggest obliterates possible, but again, it can be luck based. Again, it depends on procs, but I think Frost DK overall consistent damage is going to feel better. I think Holy Blast is actually doing some quite good damage cleaving wise. I think in RBGs is still going to be a very good spec. I think in arenas, it's going to be very squishy still, and it's going to be very stoppable still. So for me, it's going to be C tier, and maybe they will get more buffs. I think they will get more buffs along the way, but what they really need, Frost DK and Holy DK, is a big rework. And I always say that, but I think this iteration of Dragonflight, or even Shadowlands, those iterations of Unholy DK and Frost DK are probably the worst of the whole Frost DK and Unholy DK lifespan on World of Warcraft. I didn't really like the dual wield Frost DK the things that we got in how it's called in BFA and also in Legion actually. Also Walls of Draenor, I think. But again, I think the playstyle was a lot better in Cataclysm, for example, for Unholy DK and Frost DK. Now, let's talk about Priest. Disc Priest is going to be buffed. It's going to be feeling a bit better, I think. The Atonement Healing is going to be better. Now, I think overall the healing balancing is going to be on the good side. The problem is the power creep from the DPSers that are going to halt the healing balancing. It depends on how the DPSers are going to actually pump. If they pump too much, it doesn't matter how balanced the healers can be. They are not going to face them with the same kind of power from pre-nerf Disc Priest or pre-nerf Fist Weaving monks. So for me, it's going to be A tier as well. Disc Priest, I think they have the tools to heal in RBGs, in 3s as well, and in Solo Shuffle. In 2s, I feel like Disc Priest is not the best. Has some counters, like too many counters actually. And they don't have the mana and they don't have the throughput in 2s. In 3s, they still have, like, again, massive CDs. They can also contribute with the damage, and the damage is now going to be a lot higher, and the atonement healing is going to be a lot higher. So it's going to be nice. But I'm looking forward for another spec, which is Holy Priest. But I might put it in A tier because you still need to cost a lot, and it's easier to kick a healer because you know that there is no real consequences if you're missing it than kicking a DPS. If you're kicking miskicking a DPS, you're going to give precog. Now precog is nerfed, so minus 15% haste is gone. That 50% haste is now gone, so you're not going to punish yourself, but you're still making it like unstunnable. While, for example, if you're kicking a healer and it misses, well, you just wait 4 seconds and then you stun, or you're going to go for him or her, and you can just make it work. Now, Holy Priest, they will have more damage. It's also more and easier to build around damage if you want to. Now, not everyone is going to go for that. It's kind of tricky as a Holy Priest to go for like full damage because you don't have a lot of like mitigation. So you don't have the time to actually do damage, like for example Disc Priest, where you can do Praying Suppression and then you have the time to actually do a penance on the enemy, or you want to do Mind Blast on the enemy. A Holy Priest is a bit more tricky on that. Every single GCD is working and has to work. So for me, it's going to be S tier. I think there is like a pretty good resurgence for Holy Priest. Again, it's a prediction. I might put it in A tier because I feel like all healers kind of rotate around A tier except like one, which I'm going to reveal after the Priest specs. So Shadow Priest, I think it's still going to be S tier, very strong, very scary. If you let it in cast, he's going to decimate your team. If you're going for Shadow Priest, he's still going to decimate your team with CCs, and it's actually very annoying to deal with. Yes, it is killable, but then also not killable. I think in general, Shadow Priest can really work very well in a lot of comps, but also just in general in this meta. Now let's talk about Paladins, and I want to talk first and foremost about Retribution Paladin. They got not that many buffs, not that many nerfs as well. I think the mana changes are going to be something we will have to see in arenas and how it will play out. The off healing from Paladin is still very bad. Like since the nerf, it's not really worth to do a World of Glory at all. I'm going to put it in A tier because the meta is not in the favor of a Retribution Paladin, and that's our first problem. Do I really rate Retribution Paladin on the same level as Unholy DK? I feel like Unholy DK is just worse than a Paladin. They do not have the defensives as a Holy Paladin, Retribution Paladin. They don't have the spikiness of a Retribution Paladin. The CDs are a lot more stronger, but also just a lot more available towards Retribution Paladin. So just for that, I'm going to put it in B tier, because if I have to compare melees with each other, they are just better. So why would I put them together on the same tier? At least it feels like that. I'm going to push them B tier. Retribution Paladin kind of suffers because of the meta, which is around casters, and I feel like it's still going to be around casters. But there is one savior, which is the Holy Paladin, and it is going to be S here, S plus even. It is going to be insane. I made a video about it, pretty much like a preview for 10.1.5. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out. It can be seen as a guide, pretty much. They're going to play around crit. They're going to play around mastery, a bit less about haste, maybe for some thresholds. But you're going to heal a lot. You have many tools. Daybreak is insane. I'm not even talking about the mana regen. I'm talking about the extra healing you will get from it. The Holy Shocks proccing on themselves because of Daybreak. Again, your Judgments healing for more and actually reducing the damage, the incoming damage from the target because of a Judgment is going to be insane. Hammer of Wrath actually healing from damage done will make you not lose any healing per second because of your offense. Now Crusader Strike, you're going to use it as a filler or a filler. You're not going to use it normally, but you might use it sometimes. As a melee wings, caster wings, I have to test it still, but I think melee wings is still going to be very strong. And trust me, if Turbo can be alive with a Holy Paladin, so for example, there is Windwalker, Enhancement Shaman, Holy Paladin going to be very strong. There is Enhancement Shaman with an Arms Warrior or Fury Warrior with a Holy Paladin that's going to be insanely strong. So there are about like going to wreck a lot of the meta, and it really depends on how they are going to play around Augmentation Evoker. If Augmentation Evoker is going to be too insane, it might make Holy Paladin a bit less like obvious and might go for S tier. But from the testing I did, the HPS, the healing that you can produce as a Holy Paladin is unmatched. You're pretty much going to heal like Wrath of the Lich King kind of. Holy Paladin is going to be quite insane. The damage reduction now you can give like AoE, you can, there's so many good things about Holy Paladins, but if you want to check that out, please check my video. I kind of explain everything in details. It's a long video, but everything is in detail, so you will not miss anything, and you probably will be able to play Holy Paladin from just that video alone. But I will probably make a guide very soon once I'm actually like playing a lot of arenas and RPGs and any sort of PvP with Holy Paladin. But one thing is sure, Shokadin is back, and you might just 1v1 a lot of people because of that. Now let's talk about mages. Arcane Mage, I'm going to be very quick. I made a video yesterday, excuse me, about the specs. I think they are like, for the most part, buffed. Arcane Mage is kind of buffed, but I still think it is probably around B tier. They are one schoolers. The damage is now very noticeable. People cannot really like lose versus Arcane Mage because of that. I think in general you can make it work because of comps. Yes, there are comps where you can make it very much work, but you can make it work as a fire mage or frost mage in that comp. So again, I think it's pretty much obvious that Arcane mages are going to suffer this season again because of the meta, first and foremost, but also novelty is now gone from Arcane, so people cannot know how to react versus Arcane mage. Fire mage, S tier. The damage is higher than in 10.1. The damage is more available than in 10.1. You now have a neat compilation where you can do that. I made a video about mages again, but you can actually mass invis now as a fire mage, and you can actually do greater pyro in your mass invis. So your opener is going to be insane. You might just like one-shot someone because of like going for a combust, go with a greater pyro. Now, if it's very cheesy, so it's not like something you're going to obviously play, but there is the option, right? So I'm actually excited to see that. Frost mages, they are good. They are better than in 10.1, but I think, am I putting it in S tier? I'm going to put it in A tier, alongside Destruction Warlock, their brothers. They're going to form a fantastic comp, but I think it's still stoppable. A lot of things are stoppable. Like for example, the new Real Frost kind of like proc, they can have the stacks. You can pretty much like stop it with every single class. If you have a Feign Death, you can work it. If you have like a spell lock, you can work it. If you have like anything that can do a micro CC, it can work for you. Of course, I'm talking in a vacuum. If you're like counting about a Subtlety rogue doing a kidney shot while you're doing a Ray of Frost, yeah, I mean, you're probably dead. It does a lot of damage. Just Ray of Frost by themselves is going to 100-0 anyone whenever it crits, like chain crits. If you're like buffed with anything, like it's going to be insane. I think overall a great spec, and I think a lot of people are going to turn back to mages because they look very fun to play, except Arcane Mage. I think nothing changed for them playstyle wise, but Fire Mage and Frost Mage, there is something cooking from them. Now let's talk about Druids real quick. I think Balanced Druid is still going to be S tier. They got nerfed, but also buffed, mostly buffed, and the full moon, which is, there is a possibility they're going to play it, has been buffed by 100%. So the damage is going to be and will be crazy for Balanced Druids. Now, it's something I tested on the PTR, but we will have to see if it's practical to play around full moon. I don't think it's very practical. It's very kickable as well. But again, if you're playing with a sub rogue or you're playing with an elemental shaman, they are, or a Demonology Warlock in instance, you can already cross CC and make it work. But now let's see if they can actually pull it off like in a real competitive environment. But in my opinion, they are very strong. Cyclone is still very strong as a CC. Root Beam is now more countered than ever than Shadowlands, but still exists and makes the heal life a lot more difficult. And they are also very good versus Holy Paladins, so I'm actually going to wait and see how they're going to react. They might be A tier, but for me right now it's going to be S tier. Feral Druids, pretty much unchanged. They're going to be alright, but also not that right. I'm going to put it in A tier because they have some comps, but they suffer pretty much as the same as an Assassination rogues. I think it's too easy to remove bleeds, especially Evokers now. They can just cauterize, so if you see it coming, you can just cauterize it. You can CC the Feral Druid. You can also just turn on the Feral Druid. He will go bear form. So they kind of suffer. It's really on the verge of B tier. But again, if I put it on B tier, where do I put Unholy DK and where do I put Frost DK? So for me right now, I think A tier is the right spot, but it's very much on the verge for B tier. I think they need something. I think playing around Mastery is boring. And Moth3 as a whole, like the stat for every spec is actually a problem. I think Moth3 should be something that is innate and you do not really build around that, and you can play around haste and crit and another stat, for example. But it's very difficult to justify to go haste while Moth3 is so important for the damage of a Pearl Druid. So it's going to be still very difficult for them. Restoration Druid. I think Restoration Druid is also going to be A tier, but they got nerfed and buffed and also nerfed. I think the damage is going to be quite nice for 2s. I think in 3s it is like irrelevant. You're not going to go cat form or you're not going to go moonkin form to actually get some good damage. I'm actually seeing that the sun kind of ruins the camera, but it is what it is. I think Resto Druid is competitive, but it's very matchup based. I think versus some specs, it might be like A tier, S tier, or even S plus. And versus some other specs, it might be B tier. So I don't know. Like for example, Disc Priest versus Resto Druid, it's very difficult for Resto Druid to actually believe in that matchup. Even though they have now Dispel Protection, it is actually very easy to circumvent it. So yeah, it's not evident. Let's play around hunters. I think Survival Hunter has no real changes, if I'm not mistaken. I think B tier is a fair assessment. They do crazy damage, but it's heavily based around your own skill to make it work. I think it's really not a simple class and spec. A lot of people make it look better than it is. A lot of people are actually making it look worse than it actually is. So for me, B tier, again, it's a good spec. It is probably also A tier, but I have to see and oppose other specs versus Survival Hunter. I think currently in this meta, Survival Hunter is not easy to play. You can make it work, but that's pretty much like an achievement for you instead of like a statement for the spec. So MM Hunter, they got a buff really quickly. I don't know where to put. I think it's very hard to put it somewhere and be like decisive. I want to put it A tier because they are like somewhat good in that meta. If you're playing with the correct spec, it's still going to be the BG Kings. So if you're doing BGs, MM is probably one of the best. In general, you're going to have a great time playing MM, but we will have to see what is going to happen if we're going to play around the range of MM. Let's talk about BM Hunter. I think it's still very reliable. I think can make it work. They kind of suffered this current meta. They get like the pets gets rooted very easily by a lot of specs, and also like sometimes you see your pet doing like weird stuff. I'm going to put it in A tier, but I wanted to put it in S tier, but I feel like it's too S tier heavy then. It should be like a pyramid. BM Hunter is still like very good, so I'm going to put it in A tier and keep it like that. Let's talk about Elemental Shaman. I think Elemental Shaman is still going to be A tier. It's very strong. I think it could be S tier really, but in a vacuum, they are reliant with your teammate. If your teammate is very good, you're going to feel good. If your teammate is very bad, you're going to feel abandoned. The damage is still very high. They are very bursty. It's also one of my favorite specs, so I might be biased. It's meta. Like A tier is meta, S tier is God tier, S plus is like don't be like in a fairy tale. It's going to be nerfed. But very strong Elemental Shaman. They have multiple schools. They are quite tanky sometimes they are not, but like sometimes they are, and they have a lot of tools, and they are also a very good utility spec. So you have not only damage, you don't only have CC, but you have also a huge utility. A lot of specs really are quite jealous because of that. Now, Enhancement Shaman, they got a few nerfs, but also a few buffs. I think the mana the mana change is going to be a huge buff for Enhancement Shaman, but we will have to see how it plays out in arenas. I'm fairly confident I'm going to put it in A tier. I want to put it in S tier, but I'm fairly confident that it's going to be an A tier spec. I think in general it's going to be still very strong because of the purges you can have, because of the utility you can have, with hex being something you can cast and being kicked, which is fantastic. So you can give some heat, some like fresh breath for your healers. I think in general it's going to be a fantastic spec to play. It's still very hard to play though, so you'll have to prepare yourself if you want to main Enhancement Shaman to learn a lot from Enhancement Shaman and to know, because of situations, how to proceed with them in the future. Restoration Shaman is going to be... I feel like I'm going to put it in B tier. It's still good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's still a very good spec. But in general, I don't think that Restoration Shaman does very well because of like being able to die very quickly. It's very switchable once you have no CDs. People notice it. You are going to get one CC and you're dead. You're very CD based, and once your CDs are gone, it is gone. So that's unfortunate. But overall, I think we are quite happy with how the healer balance is going. I could put it in A tier, to be honest. Again, I think a lot of people are going to type before they hear me about Restoration Shaman, but they could be A tier as well. It's very hard to judge them. I feel like healers are very, very much based around comps and your teammates doing well, and less about the spec doing very, very well by themselves. I think Holy Paladin is maybe the exception. Holy Priest can be also an exception, but I do not know how it will be played in arenas. But I have some hope for healers. Mistweaver Monk, I think there is a surprise. I think for me it's S tier, but it's mainly because it fits so well the meta. We have so many classes, which is making it very hard to actually like kick a Mistweaver Monk. Because if you're kicking the Mistweaver Monk, it means that the two other DPSs can basically just free do their rotation. And just kicking the Mistweaver Monk is sometimes just not enough. And yes, you can do that if they're playing with a melee cleave. But most Mistweaver Monks are not playing with a melee cleave. So that is why I put it in S tier. Very hard to deal with, a lot of healing, and very much the best healing throughput in the whole game, with a lot of great CDs. Yeah, I mean, people will realize how strong they are once they play 10.1.5. Let's talk about DH. I think DH is in a position where they're doing pretty well. I think I'm going to put in A tier. The damage is still good. They still have some good CDs. It's always going to be the same with them. Either they're going to be pretty good or they're going to be pretty bad, but it's never going to be D tier or never plus S plus, right? Especially in this current meta. I think versus classes you can do very well, but you can also do very bad. It really depends on your comps. If your comps is actually doing an anti-caster comp, like for example Boomkin DH, which is a very good comp with a Resto Shaman, for example, you can do it pretty well versus like casters. But if you're playing with anything else, it becomes very, very hard. Even with Unholy DK, I think Unholy DK is just too squishy these days, even with AMS, that right now DH cannot really rely on Unholy DK to make that comp really good. Like a hero cleave, it has been a while, but it's not meta. So there it is. Windwalker Monk with the defensive changes, I think there is a huge resurgence. I think it's going to be A tier still because of the meta. I think it's purely because of the meta. But like on the LWC, F tier with Soul playing on Enhancement Shaman and the Windwalker, and with their like great comp, they can actually go far. So there is a reason to like be scared about the buffs for Windwalker. But I'm actually like excited to see what they're going to do with Windwalker, if they are going to rework it one day or not. But also just in general, the defensive buffs they got, is it enough? Is it enough to actually like be very strong? I'm excited to do that and to see that. Both warriors are going to be A tier. I'm not going to lie. I think Fury is better than Arms though. That's my opinion. I think Arms, they just got a pretty big nerf with the crit changes. And in general, I think Arms is not in the best lights versus classes, while for example Fury is one of the midis that can actually do some quite good damage versus classes and have a big uptime on them. Especially if they're playing with a Shadow Priest, you can really see some support from the Shadow Priest to make it possible to stick. While Shadow Priest with an Arms Warrior, it becomes a bit harder because you don't have the self-sustain, you don't have the self-root, anti-roots, for example. So again, for me, both A tier, they can do very well. And you see, like, it should be, to be honest, it's a pyramid, right? You know, you have like the best specs, then you have the best specs, and then you have the meta specs, which are the players that are going to hover mostly, and then you have like the good specs, and then you have the worst specs. It's very hard to have a D tier here. You could basically put Frost DK there, or Assassination Evoker, or Devastation Evoker, that's preference. But I'm actually very happy about this tier list. So please do let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. If you have seen the whole video, please let me know as well. Tier lists are very hard because it takes a lot of time for me, like 40 minutes right now. But I know that a lot of people are just going to skip to the end. So I put a lot of work to actually phrase and motivate my decisions on the tier list. But yeah, some people just skip it, so it becomes very hard to actually deal with it in the comments. But anyways, let me know what you think about 10.1.5, what are specs, what are you going to play, are you excited, are you not? Please let me know, and be sure to stay safe. We will catch you very soon in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.